The doors opened 2 minutes before he was supposed to say, "I do." On the other side stood the wife he thought he'd left behind years ago, and 3 children with his exact eyes, who had never once heard his voice in person until that night. What she says in the next 60 seconds will end his engagement before it starts. What she says an hour later is the part nobody in that room saw coming. Watch till the end. The line that finally breaks him isn't the one you're expecting. 300 guests. Crystal chandeliers. A string quartet playing something slow enough to make the room feel like a memory before it had even finished happening. And Jin-ho, standing at the altar in Seoul, 2 minutes from the life he'd spent years building toward. He didn't know it yet, but that life was about to end in front of everyone he knew, and a new one was about to walk through the door behind him. His best friend Taeyong straightened his tie. "You look like you're about to deliver a quarterly earnings report, not get married." "Maybe that's exactly what this is," Jin-ho said. "The biggest deal of my life." He meant it as a joke. He wasn't entirely joking. His fiancée, Soo-jin, came from a family that ran one of the country's largest distribution conglomerates. His family ran logistics and shipping. This wasn't just a wedding. It was architecture. And he'd convinced himself for 2 years that it didn't matter whether it was built on love or just very good planning. He whispered to himself, low enough that only he could hear it. "This is the life I was supposed to have." He had spent years making sure of that. Clean career. Spotless reputation. No loose threads anyone could ever pull. He was wrong about the threads. At 6:58 p.m., the doors at the back of the hall opened. They didn't slam. They didn't need to. The cool night air slid into the room like a question nobody there had thought to ask yet. And the quartet kept playing for 3 full seconds before the lead violinist noticed something had already gone wrong and let her bow drift off the string. A woman stood in the doorway. Black, tall, calm in a way that unsettled the room far more than screaming ever could have. Beside her, 3 children. No older than 7. Same dark brown soft hair. Same light brown eyes. The exact shade currently locked open in disbelief at the altar. Nobody breathed. Jin-ho turned only because everyone else had turned first. And the moment he saw her face, every piece of his composure came apart at once, like a building losing its foundation in a single breath. "Amani," he said. A name he hadn't let himself say out loud in years. She didn't rush toward him. She let the silence stretch long enough for 300 strangers to fully absorb 3 small faces that left absolutely no room for doubt about whose children they were. Then she started walking. "I'm not here to ruin your wedding," she said, her voice carrying just far enough for the front rows to hear. "I'm here so you stop living like I disappeared." Near the side entrance, Soo-jin froze mid-step in her white dress. Her mother's hand shot out to grip her arm, bracing her before anything had even happened yet to knock her down. The whisper started instantly, rippling backward through the crowd like wind through wheat. "Who is that? Why do those kids look exactly like him? Is that his?" Jin-ho stepped off the altar platform before his mind had caught up with the decision. He stopped a few feet from her, close enough now to see that her face hadn't aged into anger. It had aged into something quieter. Resolved. Like an argument she'd already finished having, with herself years ago. "Why are you here?" he whispered, as if lowering his voice could keep the moment from becoming real. "Because they're old enough now," she said. One of the children, a boy with her eyes and unmistakably Jin-ho's jaw, tilted his head slightly, studying him the way you study something you've only ever seen flattened inside a photograph. "You never told me you were pregnant," Jin-ho said. "You never asked what happened after we stopped talking," Amani answered. That single sentence did more damage than any accusation could have, because some buried part of him had always known she was right. He crouched down to their height, his voice barely above a whisper now. "What are your names?" "Kofi," the boy said. "Adiz," said the girl beside him, her hair pulled into 2 careful buns. The third child, smaller, quieter, finally lifted his eyes to meet Jin-ho's. "Niren. Mom showed us your picture," Niren said, flat and matter-of-fact in the way only a child can deliver a devastating line. "You look smaller in real life." A few guests let out a startled, nervous laugh. Jin-ho didn't. Something cracked open in his chest at that sentence harder than anything else that had been said so far. And then Adiz said the line that would follow him for the rest of his life. Mom said you forgot us, she told him. But we came anyway. He had no answer for that. Not one that would survive contact with the truth. Behind him, Sujin's voice finally broke through the silence, tight and trembling. Jin-ho. What is this? He turned to her, and for one terrible second, had nothing that wouldn't shatter something further. I don't know yet, he admitted. I'm trying to understand it myself. Right now. In front of everyone. There are 3 children standing in the middle of our engagement who look exactly like you, Sujin said, disbelief sharpening every word. And that's the best you have? What do you want me to say in this exact second? Jin-ho asked, his voice fracturing. Tell me what words make this smaller than it actually is. Maybe there aren't any, Sujin said, louder now, no longer caring who heard. Maybe that's the actual problem. I would rather every person in this room know exactly what kind of marriage I almost walked into than spend my life pretending I didn't see this. Her mother reached for her arm, murmuring something about composure. Sujin pulled away. Jin-ho's chest tightened. There was a version of the next 10 minutes where he chased after her right then, and a version where he stayed. He hadn't decided which one he was in yet, and neither had the room. Amani's voice cut through before he could choose. That part is true, she said to Sujin, surprising people with the fairness in it. He didn't know. I made sure of that. Why would you do that? Jin-ho's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through grief. Why would you hide this from me for 7 years? Because by the time I knew I was pregnant, Amani said, you'd already stopped calling. You'd already moved your things out. You'd already started over in your head, even if your name was still sitting on a marriage certificate in a drawer neither of us had opened in months. He reached for the only structure he had left. I need proof. Right now. Amani pulled a worn envelope from her coat without ceremony. Birth records. Early photos. I'm not here to argue logistics, Jin-ho. They deserve to stand in front of their father once before they're too old to remember what it felt like. He opened it. Hospital bracelets. Dates that lined up exactly with a timeline he hadn't let himself calculate until this second. But it wasn't the paper that convinced him. It was 3 faces a few feet away, wearing his own eyes. Why now? His voice broke on the second word. After everything. Why here? Amani's calm held, but something behind her eyes deepened, like a wave gathering before it breaks. Because they started asking why they don't have a father. The sentence moved through the hall like a current through water. Several guests flinched. Sujin pressed a hand to her mouth. Sujin's father rose from his seat, jaw tight. This is enough. There are lawyers for this. Not my daughter's engagement. You could have written a letter, he snapped at Amani. You did not need to turn this into a performance. They are not a performance, Amani said, her calm sharpening into something harder for the first time all night. They are his children. I ran out of ways to keep answering, what does your father look like, with silence. Jin-ho stepped between them. She's right to be here. Sit down. This isn't your conversation to finish. Sujin's father studied him for a long moment, something cold settling behind his eyes, and walked away without another word. Kofi, who had been quiet through all of it, finally spoke again. Mom cried sometimes when she thought we were asleep, he said, not as an accusation. Just a fact he'd been carrying with nowhere to put it down. We weren't always asleep. Jin-ho's composure broke completely. His hands pressed against his own face before he forced himself to look back up at the boy. I'm so sorry, he said. I'm sorry that happened. And I'm sorry I wasn't there to make sure it didn't. This, not the documents, not the accusations, not even Sujin's fury, was the moment the entire hall fell into a silence with nowhere left to hide. Sujin turned and walked toward the side exit. Jin-ho moved to follow her. Let her go, Amani said. She needs space without an audience. Right now you have 3 children who've waited a long time for 5 minutes of your attention. He stopped, ashamed at how easily he'd almost done it again, chosen to walk away from his own children without even noticing he was doing it. You're right, he said. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, Amani said. Apologize to them. When you actually mean it. He knelt fully now, marble floor against an expensive suit, eye level with all 3 for the first time in either of their lives. I didn't know about you, he said, voice trembling. If I had known, I would have come. I didn't forget you, he told them. I didn't know to remember you. That's different. He stopped because even to his own ears, the distinction sounded thin against 7 years. We separated cleanly, he said, almost to himself, trying to rebuild the timeline out loud. There wasn't a fight. We just stopped. We stopped, Amani agreed, because neither of us fought to find out if we could keep going. I left the country not long after. I found out I was pregnant once I'd already started over somewhere new. Reaching back out felt like reopening a wound that was already starting to close. You should have told me anyway, Jin-ho said. Maybe, Amani said. But you should have asked. I called you twice in the first 2 months. You never called back. I told myself that meant you'd already decided. So I decided too. I didn't know there was something to wait for. If I had known you were pregnant, you would have done what exactly? Amani asked, not cruelly, but directly enough to leave no room to hide in. Flown across the world for a marriage already falling apart? Or done exactly what you did anyway, just with more guilt attached? He had no answer. The question sat between them, unanswerable. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked again, quieter now, the anger fully drained out of it. Amani considered it for a long moment. Because I wanted to see if silence would make you curious. A pause stretched long enough that even the guests at the far edges of the room leaned toward it. It didn't. 2 words. They landed harder than everything else combined. What happens now? Jin-ho asked, and for the first time all night, he sounded genuinely lost instead of performing composure for an audience. That's not my decision to make for you, Amani said. I'm not asking you to marry me again. I'm not asking you to abandon whatever future you were 5 minutes from building. They asked to meet you. I ran out of good reasons to keep saying no. You raised them to be kind, Jin-ho said quietly. Even through this. I raised them to tell the truth without needing to destroy someone to do it, Amani said. There's a difference. He found Soo-jin in the garden outside, moonlight on her white dress, arms wrapped around herself. Did you know? She asked, not turning around. Any part of you? No. I swear to you no. But you knew her. You were married to her. That part you never told me. I told you it ended quietly. You told me a sentence, Soo-jin said, finally facing him, eyes red but dry. Not a person. Not 3 children you decided weren't worth mentioning with any real weight. I'm sorry, he said. I know, she said. That doesn't undo what just happened in front of everyone we know. She walked past him without another word. Inside, the hall had thinned. Amani sat with the triplets gathered close, Adiz leaning into her side, Kofi swinging his legs, Nyron watching the door, waiting for him. She needed space, Jin-ho said. That's fair, Amani said. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Sit with it, she said. Don't run the way you ran from the last conversation. I didn't run, he said. I just stopped reaching. It wasn't mutual, Amani said. I let you believe it was, because admitting otherwise meant admitting how badly I needed you to try harder than you did. He turned to the children. What do you 3 want? Not what your mother wants. What do you want? We just wanted you to know us, Kofi said. I know you now. That's a start, Adiz said. Nyron spoke last, his voice small but clear. Are you going to disappear again? Jin-ho leaned in, meeting the boy's eyes directly. No, not to prove something tonight. Because now I know you exist. I can't unknow that. I won't try to. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But Nyron gave the smallest nod. And that was the first thing all night that hadn't existed 5 minutes earlier. Amani rose, gathering the children. We should go. It's late. Real life doesn't pause for moments like this. Will I see you again? If you want to. She handed him a small card. You don't need to fix this today. You just needed to know it exists. The doors opened onto the cold night air, and they were gone, leaving behind nothing but the shape of everything they'd just revealed. He sat with that card in his hand for a long time. Taeyong sat beside him, saying nothing. I had the life I thought I wanted an hour ago, Jin-ho said. And now I don't know what I have. Just what I lost without knowing I had it. He didn't call the next morning. He told himself it was respect, giving everyone room to breathe. By day 3, he knew it was fear, dressed up as patience. Soo-jin called on day 4. Her voice was steadier than he expected. I've been thinking about what happens if we go through with this anyway, she said. I haven't decided anything. But I know I can't decide honestly while you're still sitting on that card, too afraid to use it. Call them. Not for me. Because 3 children are waiting to find out if that night meant anything, or if it was just one more thing you let go quiet. He called that evening. Amani answered on the 3rd ring. I wondered if you'd actually use this. I almost didn't. I told myself I was giving everyone space. It was fear. At least you're honest about that part now. Can I see them again? Properly. Not in a room with 300 strangers. A long pause. Kofi asked if you'd call. I told him I didn't know. Tell him I called. Tell him I'm asking now. I'll tell him, Amani said. But this can't be one phone call and silence again for another 7 years. If you're not ready to be present consistently, it's kinder to stay distant than disappear after they've let you back in. I'm not asking for one visit, he said. I'm asking for a chance to actually show up. Sunday, she said. We'll see how it goes. The apartment held small evidence of a life he had no part in. A calendar marked with school events he'd never attended. Height marks penciled onto a doorframe tracking 7 years he hadn't witnessed. I wasn't trying to make you feel guilty by leaving it there, Amani said, watching where his eyes had gone. It's just where it's always been. You actually came, Adiz said, surprised. I told you I would. People say that, Niren said, still guarded. I know, Jin-ho said. I was one of them, for longer than I'm proud of. I'm trying to be someone different now. It might take time before you believe that. Kofi stepped forward. Do you want to see my drawings? I have a lot of them. The second visit went worse. Adiz stayed in her room for 20 minutes, then came out arms crossed. Why didn't you come to my birthday last year? Or the year before? Or any year? Because I didn't know it existed, Jin-ho said, not flinching. That answer isn't enough. But it's true, and I'd rather give you a true answer that isn't enough than a comfortable one that isn't. That's not fair, Adiz said, voice cracking despite herself. Everyone else got a dad who showed up. We didn't even get to ask. You're right. I can't undo 7 birthdays. I can only show up for the next one. She didn't answer, but she sat down across from him at the table instead of leaving. Weeks turned into a routine neither of them had expected. He learned Kofi drew dinosaurs in elaborate, impossible armor. He learned Adiz argued every rule until she understood the reasoning. A trait Amani admitted, with the faintest smile she'd inherited from him without ever meeting him. He learned Niren watched everything before trusting it, the caution softening, visit by visit, as consistency proved itself real instead of performed. Then he missed one. A Wednesday call, work collapsing without warning. Amani's voice the next day was colder than it had been in weeks. They noticed, she said. I'm not going to pretend they didn't. I should have called ahead. It won't happen again. It might happen again, she said. Life does that. But when it does, you call them yourself and explain it yourself. You don't let me carry your absence anymore. I've done that enough for one lifetime. He took it without arguing, because he finally understood every shortcut now carried a cost he could see clearly. Sujin called near the end of that month. I don't think we should move forward with the wedding, she said. I understand. It's not punishment. I just don't think either of us can build something honest while you're still building something honest with them, for the first time. Give that your full attention. Not a split one. Thank you, he said, for seeing that when I couldn't. Take care of them, Jin-ho. Properly this time. The hardest night came in month 3. Niren spiked a fever Amani couldn't manage alone. She called at 11 p.m., her voice tight with the particular fear only a parent recognizes. I don't want to ask you this, but I can't carry all 3 of them to the hospital myself, and I have no one else to call. I'm already getting my keys, Jin-ho said, before she'd even finished the sentence. He carried Kofi and Adiz down to the car, half asleep and confused, while Amani held Niren wrapped in a blanket. 3 hours in the waiting room. Almost no words. The kind of silence that, for the first time, had nothing left to hide inside it. Thank you for coming, Amani said, near 2 a.m., exhaustion cracking through her usual calm. You shouldn't have to thank me for this, Jin-ho said. This is what I should have been doing for 7 years. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm finally doing my job. She looked at him a long moment. That's the first time you've said something like that, and it actually sounded true. The fever broke before sunrise. In the car home, Adiz, half asleep against the window, mumbled, You stayed the whole time. even though it was scary and boring. "I'll stay every time," he said quietly, not sure she was even awake to hear it. She was. "Okay," she murmured, and was asleep again before he could say anything else. Later, in the kitchen, adrenaline finally draining out of both of them, Amani said what she'd clearly been holding back all night. "I spent years angry at you in the abstract. It was easier that way. An idea of you was easy to stay furious at. A man sitting in my kitchen at 4 in the morning who actually showed up is harder to stay angry at." "You don't have to stop being angry," Jin-ho said. "I'm not asking for that." "I know," she said. "I'm just telling you it's getting harder to hold on to, since you've apparently decided to keep giving me reasons to let it go." It wasn't a resolution. It wasn't the start of anything romantic, and both of them knew better than to mistake exhaustion and gratitude for something it wasn't. But it was a shift, the kind that doesn't happen in a declaration. It happens at 11 p.m., when no one would have blamed you for staying home, and you came anyway. 6 months after the night that ended one engagement and began something else entirely, Jin-ho sat in Amani's living room while Nairan climbed onto the couch beside him. For the first time, without being asked. "Are you staying for dinner? If that's all right with you." Nairan considered it the same careful way he'd considered everything since that first night at the altar, then shrugged. The closest thing to easy he'd ever shown. "Yeah, you can stay." It wasn't forgiveness. Not exactly. It wasn't the clean-ending fairy tale's promise. It was something smaller and more honest than that. Presence, finally offered consistently enough to start meaning something. And for the first time since the doors opened that night in Seoul, Jin-ho understood that presence, however late it arrives, is the only apology that has ever actually mattered to the people who were left waiting for it. Which moment hit you hardest? The line at the altar, Soo-jin walking into the garden, or Nairan finally staying on that couch? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe for more stories like this one, drop a like if you made it to the end, and let us know, did Jin-ho earn his second chance, or is 7 years of silence something that should never fully be forgiven?